Meetra didn't know what to expect as the Ebon Hawk dropped out of hyperspace and began the approach toward Nathema. T3M4 had told her that the planet was deserted, but the little droid had found no apparent cause of the mass extinction. While exploring the surface on his last visit, he'd run tests that confirmed the environment was free of toxins and radiation. Beyond that, everything else was speculation. As the ship drew closer to the dingy brown world, she felt a growing sense of unease and discomfort. In some ways, it reminded her of Malachor 5. The massive and instantaneous loss of life on that doomed world had created a wound in the Force. The activation of the mass shadow generator had obliterated 2 armies, shredding apart the bonds of the Force that linked all living things. Meetra had been close enough to feel the shockwave. To survive it, she had cut herself off from the Force, shielding her psyche against the horrors of what she had unleashed. Many years had passed before she regained her connection to the Force. But in the end, surviving the trauma of Malachor 5 had given her the strength to defeat Darth Traya and her followers. At first, she assumed some similar tragedy had occurred on Nathema. A superweapon capable of snuffing out an entire planet would leave a blanketing echo of death and darkness. As the Ebon Hawk descended through the atmosphere, however, she realized this sensation was markedly different. It took her a few seconds to put her finger on it, her mind analyzing the problem even as her hands automatically made the necessary adjustments to bring the ship in for a landing near the coordinates T3 had given her. The events on Malachor had left a mark on the Force, a wound that would not heal. Here, however, the Force was simply gone. It was as if someone had ripped it away, leaving only an empty void behind. Her discomfort grew as the ship drew closer to the surface. This world was unnatural, and her body's instinctive reaction was one of illness and revulsion. She glanced over at T3, hovering anxiously near her in the cockpit, but the droid seemed unaffected. His lack of reaction merely reinforced the nature of her own suffering. As a droid, T3 could not sense the Force, and he wouldn't notice if it was suddenly missing. Through the cockpit window, Meetra saw a path of destruction winding its way through the city below. The remnants of Revan's crash landing. A massive chunk of permacrete had been smashed loose from a skyscraper passing by on the ship's starboard side. The pavement of the street and sidewalk below had been torn up when the vessel had skipped and skidded down the thoroughfare. The mangled remnants of hovercars and speeders traced an irregular line down the street, the smaller vehicles crushed by the passage of the far more massive starship. Meetra selected her landing spot and set the ship down carefully. The oppressiveness of the void was bearing down on her, but she did her best to ignore it. "Come on, T3, she said, unbuckling herself from the pilot's chair. "Let's take a look around and see what we can find." As she stepped off the shuttle, she felt like she had been punched in the gut. She doubled over, and T3 beeped in concern. "I'm okay," she gasped, slowly straightening up. She had visited Malachor 5 years after the cataclysm of the mass shadow generator. Traversing its surface had been agony. Mentally, she had still sensed the anguish of all who had lost their lives there. Physically, the intense gravity of the world had held her in its crushing grip, leaving her gasping for breath. It had been the most awful and horrific experience of her life. Until now. On Malachor, she'd felt the echoes of unimaginable pain and suffering, but at least she felt something. Here on Nathema, there was only a cold emptiness. It was unnatural, abhorrent. On Malachor, she had felt the echo of great destruction. Here, there was only the unbearable void of annihilation. Her body reacted with a revulsion so strong, she felt physically ill. Her mind briefly tried to imagine what had happened to cause such an abomination. then recoiled from the answers. Her mind went blank, and her body numb. She stood motionless for several minutes, or maybe it was several hours. Time had no meaning here. But the incessant squawking of T3 eventually roused her from her stupor. Drawing on the mental focusing techniques she had learned as a Padawan, she forced herself to concentrate on something, anything besides the inescapable non-presence of the Force. "You've come here to find Revan," she thought. "There has to be some clue as to where the Sith might have taken him."